Today we're here, art education. We are going to learn the process of pewter casting with cuttlebone forms. As you can see behind me is the stage setup with all the supplies for the pewter casting process. So we'll be going over that with this video tutorial. So if you hang tight and watch what happens here, we'll then follow the process and make pretty neat, cool pewter castings. So supplies that are located on the table. We'll just start, let's see, from left. Let's start from left to right. So I'm not too sure if you can see my notes there. I'll just get them out of the frame if you can. Outside of the frame there is a vise with a V-block on it, which I'll pull out here so that you can, or I'll pull the camera down so you can see that here in just a little minute. How about towards the end of going over these supplies? So that is off to my left, and it is attached to the table. We'll be using that, so I'll show you that in just a few minutes. We have a pewter bar. So we have a pewter bar. Pewter is a alloy, lead-free based metal that has a low melting point, so it works great for heating with a propane torch in order to do the casting process that we want to do. Okay, I have some strips of paper that are torn to a specific size, and you'll see why here in just a little bit. So just some regular paper, again torn to, I don't know if it's about 3 inches wide by 8.5 long. So we will be using those. Have some key rings, and there's a reason for that. There's a couple of different things we can do with these castings. So one step is to use key rings. Have a various supply of different carving tools. Okay, so we have some wooden ones. Has some points. This has a wooden point. Again, a wooden point on that end. There is a wooden or a metal pointer on a wooden stick on this one with like a carving end on one side. X-Acto knife to help do some carving. Again, this one here just has the pointer to it. This is kind of like a carving knife of some type that'll help us do this process. We have like a carving spoon, carving knife on that end. This is a tool actually for scratch art carving. A couple of different just carving flat shovel type tools, and then some simple picks. So again, a range. So carving tools are not limited to only this style of carving tools. This is just what I happen to have in the art room, and just the ones that I happen to go after in order to acquire to hopefully make the process a little bit easier. So again, not limited to these tools. Really, I mean, any type of tool that'll carve would probably pretty much work for this process. You're going to see here in a little bit that even a pencil can make marking in the cuttlebone. So, okay, the next tool that we have that will be used for the carving and cleanup process of the pewter casting is we have a set of their needle files. So they're a needle file set. So this here will allow us to, at the very end, clean up the pewter casting. So again, a set of needle files. Okay, next thing is have a number 64 rubber band. And I don't know, this is like a half-pound package of rubber bands. I basically just need a big enough rubber band to hold the cuttlebone together once we go to cast. So just some simple rubber bands. And those rubber bands actually look about like that size, so they're nothing real spectacular and real out of the ordinary. Okay, I'm not going to pull down every one of the plier tools that we have, but we have some small jewelry making pliers, a couple of different sets for this process, which is going to help us in the cleanup of the metal casting once it's been casted. So again, we have a selection, and I have another set that has even more and different pliers in order to do the process. Okay, I have a drawing, so I used an iPad or desktop to look up a design. And then I created a drawing with the design as a template for the casting. So there's the drawing and design. Have a couple of fire shelves from the kiln. It could be fire bricks, it could be anything that's fireproof in order to do the casting on. What we don't want to do is do the casting on paper because paper will burn. These stones they won't burn, so we want to make sure we're doing the casting on a fireproof stone. Okay, we have a cuttle bone. So this cuttle bone here you can see is two different pieces, but it will come as a single piece such as that. Now there's different size cuttle bones, so depending on the size of your design, you'd want to size your cuttle bone accordingly. These actually are bought, so I'll show you the package here. These are bought from a pet store actually, and they're used for birds. They actually are used to give the bird calcium, and they dull down the beak of the bird. The birds scratch on with their beaks. So again, just a simple cuttle bone from a pet store. Okay, I have a couple of sheets of 120 sandpaper. Just found that the 120 kind of works the best. If you sit there with a finer grit, it takes forever to sand, so I brought in the 120 grit sandpaper. Again, a sheet of sandpaper. Okay, in these bags, again, just have some of the bags here for some of the carving tools. So a larger set of carving tools. Here's some of those wood ones. And then I have a box of like different scratch art and X-Acto knives and stuff for carving. So just a bigger arrangement of carving tools and different carving tools. Okay, have some pewter ingots. So we took that big bar of pewter and melted off some ingots. And again, just have some ingots that are going to be approximately about an ounce, ounce and a half, maybe a little bit more in order for us to do our casting. We don't need a whole lot of pewter, so again, we just have some ingots. I already talked about the rubber bands, so 2 of those actually. Have a arrangement of different nails, and the nails are used to put the sprue in the cuttle bone, so you'll see how that process works. Pencil, because you'll need a pencil in order to draw your design, so simple pencil. I have a casting crucible, so this is a fireproof stone, little cup in the middle for when we go to melt the metal down, and you see it's on a long handle so that we can keep it away from us as it's hot in order to pour. Okay, have a jeweler's saw. The jeweler's saw has a really fine blade on it so that we can get into really small areas in order to cut the pewter away in the cleanup process. So you'll see how this works. Keep in mind that the blade is really small and you need to be careful with it. And of course the jeweler's saws are very expensive also, so this is a very intricate tool and needs to be used accordingly. So again, jeweler's saw. I have a arrangement of different string in order to make the casting a necklace if that's what you so choose. The other step that we're going to use is we could make it a keychain, so that's why we have the key rings. So remember I said key rings earlier, and now you can see we have different types of string, yarn, and whatnot in order to make it a necklace. So key ring or necklace, either way. Okay, I have a ruler to help me in the drawing process. Have a pair of fireproof gloves for when we go to do the casting, because again we're using heat, so and hot metal, so we don't want to get that stuff on us. So we're going to use some fireproof gloves. Not to mention I don't have it on the table here, but we want to make sure we have safety glasses in the process, so we'll have those on. And we have a propane torch set up. In this case, it's in a stand. The propane bottle here, it's the blue propane. There's a on-off valve at the top, and then you have a hanger that will have the torch end hanging in it. Okay, so we just have to use a propane torch in order to heat the metal to do the casting. So again, very easily set up for us. At this point, we're going to start the very first steps of doing the casting. So we will jump right into that. So here we go. We're just going to go over some of the parts here that we're going to use first and what they're all about, and then we'll start looking into how to make the carving here. So the very first thing we're going to look at is the cuttle bone. The cuttle bone, again, is purchased through a pet store. And again, birds use it for their calcium and beak to keep it from getting too sharp. But nonetheless, it is it's semi-porous. At the same time, it's very soft, fairly soft, and fireproof for the most part. And again, very easy to actually carve. So that's why we're using the cuttle bone. Cuttle bone is derived from the cuttlefish. It's the back shell for the cuttlefish. It is a non-toxic material, so when we're sanding it, the dust isn't toxic, so it's not something you want to necessarily breathe in a lot of amounts of. But at the same time, if we get a little bit of it in our system when we're breathing, it's not gonna do anything necessarily to us. So again, non-toxic, easy to carve, so soft yet fireproof. So again, soft, fairly easy to carve, and fireproof. And used with birds, pet, yep, we went over all that. So, again, the simple cuttle bone. Now, when you get the cuttle bone, it'll have one side that is semi-rounded, and the other side will be kind of rough. So what we want to do is we want to make that smooth. So you're going to see the process of that. Okay, so for preparing the cuttle bone, we are going to take our sandpaper, okay, and we're going to put it on a smooth surface. All right. So we have that set for us. Okay, we're going to take the cuttle bone, and we're going to take a ruler. Now we want to measure, okay, the length of the cuttle bone. In this case, it's 6 inches. So I am going to put a mark on the cuttle bone on one end at 3 inches, and on the other end again at 3 inches. And I'm going to take the ruler and I'm going to draw a line across it. Okay. Now, before I actually do that, okay, what I wanted to do, and I should have said that beforehand, is sand this surface flat. So you're going to see me, I'm going to sand it real quick, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark it again so you can see me do it one more time. All right, so what you're going to want to do is take that surface that is semi-rough, put it on the sandpaper, okay, and we want to scratch this back and forth. It's going to create some dust on the sandpaper, and we want to try to get this sanded as smooth and flat as possible on the bottom side. Okay, so you can see there, I had sanded it a little bit prior to this, but I sanded it here again, and you can see we're fairly smooth, as smooth as we can get it. Okay, now that dust we just created on the sandpaper, we just take that out of our trash can and we dump it off. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my line back on this again. Okay, so there's my line across the middle of my cuttle bone. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this jeweler's saw, and I'm going to be really careful because this stuff doesn't cut too hard. It really cuts actually pretty easy. Okay, and I'm going to put it on the V block, and I'm going to start at the very top, and I'm going to saw slowly but yet evenly all the way across that line. Okay, creating two halves. So with my vise, which I told you about earlier that you couldn't see in the frame, it attaches to the edge of the table with a little screw at the bottom. So we need to find a flat, a piece of, or the edge of the table that has flat number 1 on the bottom, flat on top. And you just vise it to the table. It doesn't have to be super tight, just nice and simple to the table. And then within that vise, we made these blocks that are on a 1x with a 2x4 and a little notch, a little V notch cut in them. So again, that's why I call it a V block. Okay, you just take this and you slide it into the vise and snug it down. It doesn't have to be over tight. Okay, we're going to take our cuttle bone and we're going to place our cuttle bone right in front of it. Okay, I'm going to start with the leading edge towards the teeth of the V block, and I'm going to take my saw and I'm just going to start sawing around that line I created and going as straight as possible. Okay, don't get your hands underneath, because we don't want to cut our hands with the saw blade. Okay, and you want to saw about as far as possible, okay, through the cuttle bone itself. Again, nice and slowly and fairly easy. And then you can take and you can break it apart with whatever little bit is left. And you have your two pieces of cuttle bone. Now if you take one and lay it over the other, they should be approximately the same size. Not perfectly, but approximately. We have our two pieces of cuttle bone, approximately the same size. If you want to label them 1 and 2, I did that with mine. You know, I guess it's going to be your cuttle bone, so probably doesn't really matter, but I just went and labeled them. If you have to do some fine-tune sanding at this point, you can. I've found I don't really have to, so I'm set and ready to go. Now, my suggestion would be is you leave this harder rounded surface face down and leave the soft side that you're going to be carving faced up. That way it doesn't get any scratch or any dents or scratches or anything from whatever surface it is you're setting it on. Okay, you're going to take a piece of your white paper. Okay, so I'll put up a new piece right here. So we're going to take a piece of that, and what we want to do at this point is we want to take the cuttle bones. All right, and we want to trace down the cuttle bone shapes. Okay, so that is actually the biggest reason I put 1 and 2 on these. So I'm just going to go towards the top of the paper here and set the cuttle bone on top. And I'm going to trace right around the cuttle bone itself. Okay. And that one I labeled 2, so I'm going to put 2 right up here in the corner. And then I'm going to trace down number 1. I'm not going to go through the whole process here because I already have it done, but we'll just go through a little bit of it. Okay, I'm going to put 1 up in the corner. I'm going to set the cuttle bone pieces to the side. I'm going to take my ruler, and what I want to do is I want to measure 1/4 of an inch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 little marks from the edge of the ruler. I want to measure in on all the sides. Let's do number 2 here. Measure in on all the sides. I want to put some little marks. Now on each side I would probably put like 2 marks. Okay, 1 towards the top, 1 towards the bottom. If you want to put a third one in the middle, that's fine. In this case I'm only going to do 2. 1 towards the top, 1 towards the bottom. Okay, and then I'm going to do the very top right here. I'm just going to actually do a mark right in the middle. Okay, now I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to go across the middle, and I'm going to keep it even. I'm going to put a line from edge to edge, about like so. And then I'm going to have to freehand draw these in. And I'm going to draw in between the marks. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to leave a 1/4 inch gap around the edges. Why? Because we don't want the metal casting to go to the edges because it'll just pour out of the cuttle bone. Okay, so a 1/4 inch from the edge of the cuttle bone that you trace to your new surface. Okay, and I'd want to do both pieces. So you can see here in my sample, I did that, and I have here a 1/4 inch in from the edge. So I drew these lines in, 1/4 inch in from the edge, and I know I have to keep my design within that area right in here, 1/4 inch in from the edge. Okay, now at this point, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to the computer or an iPad, and you want to look up your design that you're going to use for your keychain or necklace. So you have to choose whether you're going to do a keychain or whether you're going to do a necklace, because they could be designed differently size-wise, either large or small, depending on what exactly it is you're designing for. Once we have the drawing of number one, the outline of our cuttle bones pieces, and our 1/4 inch outline inside of that, we can then find our design and sketch out our design. Now, for this demonstration, I chose the Swiss symbol, Swiss Army symbol actually. And in this case, what you want to definitely make sure you have for a necklace or a keychain is you must have a holder hole, okay? And they call that a bail. So the bail or holder hole at the top of the art piece that you have. Okay, so if you just draw it circular with a hole in the middle, they call that, again, the bail for the pendant. So the pendant hangs below and the bail at the top. Okay, now what I did was I then took and, so I drew the bail first, and I left it down actually below the 1/4 inch area around the outside. Okay, so I left it below that, drew the bail, and then I drew the pendulum underneath. Was shade all the parts that are going to be cut out again, shaded all the parts that I'm going to cut out with any of the carving tools. Okay, and then at the very top, in the 1/4 inch space that outlines that you shouldn't have your pendulum drawing in, I'm going to draw a section for a cutout for a sprue hole. Now, a sprue hole is a hole that will allow the metal to flow into the cavity of the pendulum that you're designing. Okay, so again, a sprue hole, a bail, or hole for the necklace twine or the keychain ring to go through, and your pendulum underneath. Okay, all within that 1/4 inch area around the edge. So definitely make sure it's within that area. And again, you can push the limits out to that 1/4 inch size. I didn't want to go that big. Mine's still fairly big. Some of yours will probably be a little bit smaller. So again, you know, I just chose to, I don't know, keep it within that area with no problem. Now, you also have to make sure that your other half of your cuttle bone will cover it. So in this case, mine will. All right, and that's side one. So you just want to make sure that covers it. Do you need to carve into both side 2 and 1? No. In most cases, it's easiest or best if you just carve into the one side. And again, it'll take up less metal that way too. So again, just carve into the one side. All right, now that your sketch is done, so you sketch out design, draw the bail, make sure you have the sprue hole, and of course have your pendant. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to take our cuttle bones pieces, and we want to transfer our drawing to the cuttle bone pieces. Now you can do that a few different ways. You could take this and cut it out, and then trace around it. Or you could just take and lay this on top and push fairly hard with a pencil, and it should come out on top of the cuttle bone. So I'm just going to do that process. So I'm just going to take this and lay it in front of me, and I'm going to put my pattern over top and making sure I'm lined up as close as I can get it to the top and sides. If you wanted to even just cut out this shape and lay it on top, that would be fine. So you cut out the cuttle bone shape. It might be easier than what I'm doing here, but in this case I'm just going to lay it on top and get as close as I can. And I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to push fairly hard, not super hard, but fairly hard, right over top of my drawing. And as I go, you can kind of hear the crunching of the cuttle bone underneath, which means it's indenting it. And I'm even going to cut in my sprue hole. And I chose a fairly simple yet semi-complex design. just for the demonstration purposes, so it'll go a little bit faster. And I might cut out some of this footage just to keep it shorter, so be prepared for that. Now, if you go back over a spot that you already traced down, that's fine. It just indents it a little bit further. Okay, so I should have my design all sketched out there. If I take this away, you can kind of see the indent. Now what I probably want to do is I want to come in here with my pencil, and I'm going to kind of pencil it in a little bit better so I can see where exactly it is I'm going to carve. Okay, so I just penciled it in the areas that I'm going to carve approximate. Okay, I'd take my other half and I'd probably lay that here on top also. Okay, and trace out my sprue hole from the top edge. Okay, and my very first step I'm going to do, sorry, what I definitely want to do here then is to just kind of shade in the area that I'm going to cut out. Just so I know exactly what parts it is I'm cutting out. Again, just lightly shade it. And again on this one. This way I don't forget exactly what it is I'm cutting out. Okay? So again, my pattern's shaded out. I have a pretty good idea exactly what it is I'm going to cut out. I'm going to go ahead and start with the spruce. So what I want to do is take a nail. I don't know, there's no special rule or written law on these nails. You just got to pick one of them. And start in the middle, and you kind of use it as a cutting tool. And I just take and kind of twist it. And what it'll do is it leaves a rounded out section for the sprue. Now, we don't have to go really deep with the sprue. If you go, I don't know, a quarter of the way into the cuttle bone with it is fine. And if it's not right on your pencil marking, as long as you have it close is the biggest thing. So there I have it just cut in about a quarter of the way in. That's a pretty good sprue in that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do it on this one. Now this one you don't want to go too far because you're going to get into your bail part, so you just want to kind of, you want to take this fairly easy and just use the nail to kind of dig the sprue area out. And this one I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I want to be able to make sure I can put the metal into the cuttle bone. So I don't know, if I went about halfway in, it's pretty good. Okay. And that's cut out there. Alright, then I'm going to, I don't know, grab my tool of choice. And I just put a arrangement of tools out here. Might use this pointy one here with a little scooper on the other end. And there is no like set distance down. You have to carve this. I don't know if you go, like I said, about that quarter of a way down within it. And just take your time and scrape out the material you want gone. And you want to dump the material out every so often. And again, this stuff, it cuts pretty easy. So the biggest thing you have to remember is you can't add material back. So you want to take your time and get it done right. And again, the deeper you dig the part out, the thicker the casting will be. Remember, I want a hole in the middle of this bail, so I leave the middle flush with the sanded cuttle bone, I dig out around it. Okay. Again, this doesn't have to be super exact, but you know, it's got to be close. Because again, we'll use tools to clean it up when we're done. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep digging this out here. So we'll speed the video up here a little bit as I'm digging this out. So I essentially used basically one tool, and I just carved out, again, the section that I had drawn on and shaded. So I cut that section out with the one tool, made sure my corners and all were sharp, and I don't know, I have it probably carved, I don't know, not even a quarter of the way into the cuttle bone. So it's not really deep. Just deep enough that some metal can flow in there. Now what I want to do next is I want to take like a scraper tool, and I use mostly one tool for that. So I'm going to take a scraper tool with a fine point, and I'm going to just do some vent lines off of the sides and the bottom of the casting. And the reason for that is it'll get rid of any of the gases that are in with the metal as we're casting it. Okay, so just some lines. They're just some shallow lines dug going out from the casting to the outer edge of the cuttle bone. Now the two halves of the cuttle bone have been carved with our design. We put some gas vents in the cuttle bone for the gas to escape when the metal fills the form up for the design or shape that we had carved into the cuttle bone. So at this point what we want to do is we want to take our 2 rubber bands, and again 2 is plenty, you shouldn't have to have more than that. Okay, we take the 2 rubber bands and we want to make sure the sprues line up with each other. Okay, but you set the sprues on top of each other. Molten metal to be poured into. You take one rubber band and you wrap it around, and I always take and I'll twist the rubber band and put it back around so that it stays nice and tight. Sometimes towards, and I tried to keep them more towards the middle, but a little bit towards the bottom on this one. You may need to go a 3rd time on this bottom section, which is what I'm doing here. So I'll go a 3rd time. And again, just to make sure that it's rubber banded and held together nice and tight. Okay, now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take some clay. And it can be any clay. It can be the regular fire or kiln firing clay that you have in the classroom. But we want to take some clay and put some clay around this thing to, number 1, seal up the edges, and number 2, create a stand for the... Okay, so the clay that we have is again going to be your low heat kiln firing clay. Well, I guess it's not real low heat, but it's you know, manageable heat, like a cone 4 I think, for just your clay, general kiln firing clay that you have in the classroom. So we're just going to take some of that. What you don't want to do is close up the top here, because remember we had those vents and some of the gas needs to get out. So we're just going to go up, I don't know, about 3/4 of the way up the side of the cuttle bones, and we're just going to mold this clay kind of around the edge of the cuttle bone. Again, we'll take some more for the other side. Again, going up about 3/4 of the way up the side of the cuttle bone. Okay, and then we're going to use a chunk of it at the bottom for it to sit in. Might just take and flatten this out a little bit. And we just want to create like a stand for the cuttle bone to sit in for our pouring process. So there, it doesn't have to be anything pretty. It just, again, has to hold up the cuttle bone in like a stand type formation and seal the edges. Again, don't seal the edges all the way up because we still want those gases to escape. Okay, we're going to take the piece then, and we're going to put it towards the middle of one of the fireproof stones for the casting. And, don't put it at the center because there is a crack there, so put it more towards the center of one of the stones. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the pewter ingot. Okay, and we are going to melt some of this pewter ingot. And you can see I've already done it, but we'll take some of this and we'll melt it into our crucible. So we're going to take our crucible here, okay, and we're going to melt some of that into the crucible. Now, this has already been done. So in this case, what I have is I have some pewter ingots. So I'm just going to grab one of those pewter ingots. Again, our crucible, pewter ingot, and then we are going to have our firing torch. Okay, and in this case, a propane torch. So the pewter ingot, we melted some in here, got a little ingot. It should be enough to fill that casting. So we're going to use that. Okay, now at this point what we're going to do is we're going to take and we'll take the propane bottle, has our valve attached to it. That leads to our torch handle. Okay, so it leads to our torch handle. And we're just going to take that torch handle and we're going to put it over so that it's kind of hopefully strung out to the point of where we need it to be. So we're just going to kind of string it out so we can use it pretty easily. Alright, and then what we want to do is we want to take this and we want to turn the valve to on, and it shows a little arrow towards the direction of on. We want to turn that on, and you just want to go all the way on. Okay, so make sure that's all the way on. And then what you want to do is you want to strike the handle. So right here, you just pull you pull the little lever right here to make, number one, the gas flow through the torch, and number two, to set a striker. So you pull that, and you can see the torch then gives us a flame. Now, what you want to do is anytime you set this down, make sure you're setting it on the fireproof stone so you don't set it on anything that's paper or anything that may burn. My next step is I'm going to take my ingot, I'm going to place it in my crucible, put my crucible close to where it's manageable, and I'm going to put it more towards the center of, how are we going to do this here? Okay, I'm going to put this more towards me, and I'm going to put it more towards the center of the stone I'm working on, and put my torch end next to it. Now, you may want to take this stand and the propane torch and move it a little bit further away, so I'm going to do that right here, just so it's further away from the flame that we're working with. Alright, now you might want to add some borax. Borax is a powdery flux material. You might want to add that to the pewter. In this case, we're just going to attempt to try it here without any borax to make, and what flux does is it just makes it flow better. So we're going to see how well it flows, just if it's manageable the way it is without any borax. But if it doesn't flow right, then we definitely want to add that. Okay, now all we want to do is we want to take and heat the pewter in the crucible, and then we want to continue heating it as we're pouring. Now I'm going to run the torch with my left hand and run the crucible with my right. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and turn this so it's sideways, so I can take and actually pour the crucible right into it as I'm heating. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and light the torch. And it takes a little bit of time for the pewter to warm up, number one, and then become molten. And you can see when it does become molten, you can actually move it around in the crucible. Okay, And what you want to do is you want to wait till it heats enough that it actually comes to like a bubble right in the middle of the crucible. Okay, and at that point it should be warm enough to bring it over top, and we just want to hopefully hit the sprue at the top with the molten metal. Okay, until it fills all the way up. Now if you take and you spill a little bit of molten metal off to the side, that's okay. We'll be able to just scrape that up and use it for future projects. So it's not a big deal, but you can see there then I also poured all the metal out of the crucible. Okay. Now again, the torch, make sure you just set it down on the fireproof bricks so that you don't set it on any paper or the table, melt the table, or burn any paper. And basically want to wait for it to cool down. Now the other option is to take the torch end and set it back away into the holder of the torch itself. Right? Then setting it down won't be a problem at all. Alright, now it's going to take a few minutes for the molten metal in there to kind of harden up, so give it a few minutes, and remember the metal in there is still hot. So we really want to be careful with it and not get it on our skin as it's cooling. Okay, and as I say, wait a few minutes. I don't think there's a specific set time, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or anything like that. We just want to give it a couple of minutes so that, again, it cools down. So we've waited a few minutes for the molten metal to cool down. We can take the clay and we can peel the clay off the form. Again, keep in mind that it could be warm. This clay right here, we'll make sure we just throw it away because it does have pieces of metal in it. We don't want to use it for any type of clay project at this point because of the metal that may be in it. All right, and then we should be able to take our rubber bands and remove those. It is possible that the heat got to them and possibly ruined the rubber bands, which is fine. We'll just discard of them. Here I got some molten metal that stuck the band in it. Okay. And you take the cuttle bone and you separate it. Now if it's hard to separate, you might have to take a tool and pry it apart. If the cuttle bone breaks apart, that's okay. It is possible it would do that. Now, you might have to take your tool and actually dig. That was a little hot, so as I said, it could still be a little hot. But you might have to dig some of the material out in order to get your metal piece out of it. And kind of dig around the metal piece, and you can see the metal pieces in there. But eventually, as you dig and you work the piece of metal out, it will come out of the cuttle bone. Okay, any leftover pewter, again, can be used. So make sure you're not just throwing the pewter away. You return the pewter to the teacher so that we can use it for future projects. So in this case, you see some of the pewter actually ran out my vet holes, which is okay. But we want to make sure we keep that. Now I'd want to work this rubber band out of the pewter in order to keep the pewter, but nonetheless we want to keep this. Okay, any of the cuttle bone material will just get thrown away with the clay, and again we can sweep all that up. Okay, the pewter will just keep to the side. I'll get that rubber band out of there obviously for us to reuse it, but okay, and then you can see that I have a form of the casting that I carved into the cuttle bone. Now, it does have the sprue on it, so we're going to have to work at getting the sprue off. And I can see that actually the hole that I tried to create didn't go all the way through, so I'd probably have to work on, we could probably take a drill and drill the hole out for the keychain. So there's different ways we can make sure we clean this up. I'm probably not going to show it all of it on camera, but I'll show some of it. Okay, my first step of cleaning up this piece is to just take it and wash it off. Now what I'm actually going to do first is get the vents holes that I had carved. I'm going to get those little sticky pieces of metal off there because they are sharp. So what I want to do is I want to take one of my jewelry working pliers and I'll just work those off. Now if we have little pieces of pewter like this that we're working off, that can just be thrown out, be swept up with the cuttle bone that was left over. Okay. So again, I just want to get rid of maybe some of the sharp pieces that are around the edge. Okay. I see there's a little piece right here. I could take this pliers and work that out of there. Instead of sitting there and cutting all of this. And you can start to see the form as I work on it. Alright, so what you want to do is take this over the sink, use a brush, so we'll probably have a couple of wire brushes in here, but take a soft wire brush or a toothbrush, either way, and scrub the metal form just to get the extra cuttle bone material cleaned off of it. At this point I washed the casting off. Now keep in mind the smoother side that you have here was the side that was faced up as you were carving your casting. Okay, the side that you want that is going to be your decorative side will be the side that you were carving into. Okay, so keep that in mind if you have like words, because what you're going to have to do is mirror the words, so write them backwards so that when you pull the casting out they're written the correct direction. So keep that in mind if you have words. We're looking at the bottom side as we were carving the casting. Okay, so again at this point I cleaned it. I had to take a little pointer tool and scrape some of the cuttle bone out, used a brush to scrub it, and it turned out pretty good at this point. Okay, now cleaning this up is again all in the eyes of the beholder or the artist. Okay, so as clean or as smooth or as nice as you want to make this, you just have to be willing to put the effort in and the work into it. Now for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to show you some of the process here and a couple of the tools I use. I am going to work on it off screen or off camera, bring it back, and you'll see the sprue and stuff all done after I talk about it. So do keep that in mind that I'm not going to work on it 100% to completion right here in front of the camera. But I will show you the process. So one of the very first things I'd want to do is I'd want to take and cut this sprue off. Now to do that I'm going to take the jeweler's saw. Again, keep in mind that this blade, it is very fine, it is fairly hard to work with, so just make sure that when you're cutting, okay, you might want to hold this in a vise. We have those small vices I showed you that clamp onto the side of the table, so you could hold this into a vise as you're trying to cut, but you take, and the saw cuts towards you, not away from you, okay? So as you're pulling it towards you, it'll do its cutting. And again, we just want to cut, and you cut nice and slow, around the circle, okay, of this little bail at the top of the art piece. Okay, so I'll do that off camera. I'll go ahead and cut that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a drill bit and a drill, probably drill press or drill, and I'm just going to drill out the center hole of the bail. So I'll do that off camera and bring it back and show you. Now, in the meantime, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take a file. Now keep in mind, files push, they don't pull. Okay, so you push a file to do filing. So as I file, I might decide, okay, I'm going to file off some of the rough edges here on the side. Okay, as I file, I'm going to put this in the vise, and I'm just going to take, and what you do is you push and lift, push and lift, push and lift. Okay, and as you get better at it, you can go pretty fast with it. Okay, and it's going to file off, again, some of the rough edges maybe you don't want. Now again, you can file and do this as much as you want until you feel like you as the artist have it to the exact look that you want it. Okay, so again, filing. Now some of the other processes is you might take some pliers, and anywhere you have some extra material you might just take and pinch, and this stuff you can kind of actually just work back and forth, and it'll peel the metal off of the art piece. So again, you can use pliers to get in there. Okay, you could use pliers to help hold the piece as you're filing it. Okay, so you can hold the piece and file. All right, you could have somebody else help hold it. So there's a lot of different ways we can work at cleaning the piece up. So files, pliers, here's a set of files, your jeweler's saw as you cut. Okay, so we'll look at the vise right now. We'll put this in the vise and I'll show you a little bit of cutting with the jeweler's saw. I also forgot to mention that the pieces that, or the old cuttlebone pieces, so the old cuttlebone pieces and the clay that you had used is no longer good, so this just gets swept up and thrown away. So make sure that happens also. Okay, one other thing I may not have mentioned when cleaning up your casting is a piece of sandpaper. Okay, so the sandpaper that we're using to sand the cuttlebones, you can actually take that and you can use that to clean up your casting also. Okay, so sandpaper works really well. Just have to make sure that you're moving your sandpaper around as you're sanding because it starts to wear it out. Okay, so between files and sandpaper, we can file and sandpaper this thing down. So we're here set up again to look at our mini vise. Remember we had that V block in here. Now you could use this V block to put your casting on and use things like your file to do the filing we need to do. Okay, it works great for all this type of stuff. So again, the V block works really good for filing and cleaning this up. Sanding, whatever it is we need to do. Now, we're not going to use it for that, we're going to use it for the saw. So to do that, I want to take out my V block and I'll set that aside. And I'm going to take my pewter casting and I'm going to put it in here hanging out the end of it, and I'm going to clamp it down nice and light. Now what you don't want to do is clamp it overly hard, because if you clamp it overly hard you'll smash the piece. So just fairly light, just enough so that it holds it. Then I'm going to take my jeweler's saw, and again the jeweler's saw is really fine. Okay, so you just want to start nice and lightly. Okay, so you might have to squeeze it a little bit harder than we really want to get it to hold. Now, we're not cutting real fast. You're just cutting nice and light. And we're not forcing the saw. So what you want to do is just lightly let the saw do the cutting. Okay, now don't turn the saw too fast. You want to be turning the saw as you're cutting. So don't turn the saw if you're not in a cutting motion, because if you turn the saw when you're in a non-cutting motion, it will break the saw blade. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to saw about halfway. Okay, now if I saw halfway and I can't back the blade out, what you want to do is you want to loosen up the saw blade clamp right here and the top of the frame, and let the saw blade come out of the saw and then feed it through so it comes out. Okay, then I'm going to take my pewter piece, loosen the vise up, and I can see I cut about halfway. I'm going to turn it over so I can cut the rest of the way. Now I'm going to go to the other side of the vise so I can still see my casting. I can't see it from the back side, so I want to see it from the front side. And I'm going to clamp it in there again. And then I'm going to have to reset my saw blade in the clamps on the jeweler's saw. So to do that, you just take and you have to make sure the cutting teeth are pointed down and that they'll cut being pulled towards you. Okay, you loosen up this metal piece right here and you slip the saw blade down in there and you snug the piece up, and then you take this back part of the frame and you slide it back so it tightens the blade up and you cinch it tight. Now we should be able to go ahead and start this again. And again, don't turn the saw unless you're in a sawing motion because it will break the blade. And eventually you're going to make it all the way around the bale. And it'll cut the sprue off. Okay, if it bent your pewter piece just a little bit, all you gotta do is kind of bend it back in place. It is pretty soft, so it'll bend back in place. Now I probably could have taken a little bit more time and cut my bale a little bit nicer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my V-block back in, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to file that up a little bit just to make it look better. Okay, and I'm going to work on making that bale at the top better. But you can see there my sprue has been cut off, and then I want to go ahead and drill the hole for the key ring or the necklace, or the string that I'm going to tie it for the necklace. After a little bit of time of being at the vise and taking a file and some sandpaper, the pliers and some other things, other tools in order to get this pewter piece cleaned up and to the shape that I want. And then of course shining up with some water and brush. The piece doesn't look too bad. Now you could spend more time. I could have probably made the piece a little bit deeper and thicker, and spent a little bit more time with the files and sandpaper to get it a little bit smoother. I kind of like the rustic look of where I had dug out the cuttle bone and where it left like different grooves and pits from how porous the actual cuttle bone is itself. I then took it down to the shop. And we'll either have a drill bit or we'll take it to the shop, take our pieces to the shop, and we'll drill out the holes with a drill press or just a hand drill. Could be that I'll just bring a drill down to the art room and we'll just take the small vise and we'll drill these holes too. But nonetheless, just take and drill a hole through the bale of the art piece or the casting piece that you made. And then I took a file and just kind of cleaned up the burrs and whatnot on that end so that it doesn't cut the string or the wire or string or rope or twine or whatever it is you're going to use in order to go through there in order to make a necklace out of it. So again, there's the finished casting piece. I could have spent a little bit more time probably cleaning it up and getting it to exactly where I want, which I might still do. But nonetheless, for the video purpose, that is your casted piece. Now again, I have a couple of different ways I can mount this. One way would be to get a ring, a key ring, and mount it as a keychain. So to do that, I can just take the keychain, I can take a pliers, open up the key ring, and feed the key ring through, leaving a keychain. So that's pretty neat. Now the other option is in the classroom I have a large selection of yarn, so different colored yarns. And then I have a selection, here's some black rope, I think that's rope. It's a mild, smaller rope. Some string, and some different types of like baler type twine stuff anyway. So have a selection of different colors and stuff of different things that you can make a necklace out of. So to do that, let's just choose, let's choose this one here. You could even take like pieces of this, and you could choose to braid it. There's also different ways you can knot and tie it. So we could YouTube different ways to make the necklace part of it, a little bit neater. For this video, I'm not going to do that, but if it's something that interests you, we could, again, YouTube it and come up with a process of doing this. So I'm just going to, cut about a 2-foot long piece, just enough to get around your neck to wear it as a necklace. Thread it through the bail. And then, of course, let's see, right over left, and left over right, to create a knot for then a necklace. Okay, so once completed, you turn it in for a grade, and we talk it over, and fill out a grade sheet, and then we can put a nice grade down for the lovely work that you did, and you can then take the art piece home and enjoy it from there. Again, really cool to hang from your keys, or really cool to hang from your neck to show it off. In this case, this one's a little big, so you might want to make like a necklace a little smaller, but I don't know. All in all, I think a pewter casting that's silver and shiny is kind of really neat. So I hope that you kind of enjoyed this process, and we're just going to actually bring the video back up top a little bit so I can show kind of what the workspace looked like once completed. I guess if you did notice in this video, when I was actually doing the casting, I didn't wear the fireproof gloves. I make that as an option. If you don't feel comfortable, obviously, using the heat and whatnot and the molten metal in order to pour. I guess in my opinion, I've worked with metal enough that I'm working with such a small amount that it didn't really bother me. But again, in some cases, you might feel more comfortable wearing the gloves. So, and of course, I'll always be there to assist in the process. So that's why you didn't actually see. I think you can maybe see, you saw the gloves in the frame, and I didn't actually wear them. But again, a good safety procedure to follow. And of course, in my casting process, you couldn't see me, but I was wearing safety glasses at the time. So making sure you have good eyewear too when you're doing the casting. All right, so with that said, we've left a bit of a mess. I'll bring the camera down here. You can see the leftover residual of the casting material that we'll end up throwing away. So I swept it up in a dustpan. So make sure you're sweeping it up. The dust from the cuttle bone, we can make sure we dump off the sandpaper. We want to take the gas, which I actually didn't do, and you want to close the gas. And I didn't show that in the process, but you can see here off goes righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So you want to make sure you turn that off. And then of course we'll end up picking up all the supplies and putting them back in a box where they belong when you're all completed. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you stay tuned for more creative, fun videos in the near future. That's such a lame sign off. I'm just not very good at this. Well, I hope you enjoyed it anyway. See ya. Okay, I got it. I know, different location. Had to think it over. This is me telling you, stay creative. Good sign off, huh? All right. See ya.